on Sunday, I think the 26th. Therefore, please welcome your friends and well-wishers. Urge them to join Radio Biafra London, because Ntebonka, Ntebokwanonka, most of the things we are suffering today is because of ignorance. Ignorance of history. Ignorance is the highest killer, for your information. Ignorance. Therefore, we have to correct our mistakes by knowing our history. That is the issue. We forgot, we neglect the most important thing, and started pursuing what's supposed to be the end product. We have to come of age, mature. Do you know that maturity comes with freedom? Do you know that? Do you know that? Maturity comes with freedom. Until a fetus is matured, it's not going to come out. Once it's matured, it's time to come out. The womb will no more contain it. As a teenager, you finish your school, you go to your school. Once you finish, freedom and independence is a sign of maturity, for your information. We all know that. As an Igbo person, Igbo boy, whether you come from a very wealthy parents, and every time they are giving you everything you want. I am talking as an Igbo man. As a child, you are being given everything, provided with everything. You are they carrying you to school. A time will come, once you are matured enough, even all those things, you no longer like it. If they want to take you to school, say, no, daddy, no, I can go by myself, I don't want it. Which means you are trying to develop a sense of independence. It's a sign of maturity. So, our freedom, the agitation for our freedom means that we are matured. And we become really matured by knowing our history. That is why we are doing what we are doing. And do not forget that on 30th May, there will be total lockdown in the whole land of Biafra. There is press release on that effect. We are in a serious business, restoring a lost nation. Therefore, it is not a child's play. People have died and continue dying. Therefore, without taking any much time, I will hand over the platform to our special guest, Dr. Justice Ukachi Lois, to take on the platform. Mazi, please, welcome to the program, and over to you. Ndewo.
Ndewo Machineke. Mazi Jonathan, good evening, and greet every member who's listening, all Biafrans, lovers of freedom, and of course our indomitable members, IPOB. I salute the extraordinary courage of our leader, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, who you all know is a prisoner of conscience. And it was through him that is made possible that throughout the world we now have a voice which he himself instituted on this hallowed platform, which we call and know as Radio Biafra. So it's a great privilege to come here and share with you the ongoing series of discussions, lectures about our history. Today's topic is an Aburi Accord. That's how it started, but Aburi Accord became Aburi Discord. So we're going to examine what happened here. As you know, when Aburi failed, we ended up losing more people in the Biafra-Nigerian war. And so that we get our bearings, it is such a critical situation that as they came to kill more people, Ojukwu stated quite categorically that he sees Biafra as a bastion of freedom in an age in which freedom and self-determination conditioned by the colors of your skin. He says, I will go on to say further that for the acceptance of black race, there must be a Biafra. And if this Biafra is stifled, meaning the 67-70, if this Biafra is stifled, then perhaps in the future, another will emerge. So, as Mazi Jonathan mentioned, we're in the serious business. We're establishing a nation. It's called the TEN, the Emerging Nation, Biafra. And I come to share with you the historic background that was literally the last straw that broke the camel's back, the Brewis Accord, which became a discord. So what was this about? Well, in the last discussion, we stated that there was a coup in January 1966, followed by that coup of January 66. They tried so hard, being a Nigerian coup, to bend it into an Igbo coup. As a result, there was what they call a counter coup or a revenge coup, which is actually an Araba coup to get out of Nigeria by killing their fellow citizens. The British intervened and dissuaded them not to leave, but to handed over the key to the cage to them, the Lugadian cage, which you and I are still in. Now, having got the key, they now want to make sure everybody in that cage listens to what has answers to their dictates. And the Abu Accord was trying to find a way to resolve the ongoing killings, because they turned on their fellow citizens, not only massacred them. Some people say it's not genocide. Well, it certainly was a slaughter. It was a slaughter directed at a particular ethnic grouping. So it's a geno slaughter. The range of which is between 30 to 100,000. That's the ones as an estimate. And you know, when so many people are killed, a lot more are usually injured. And those that ran back, there were more injuries, plus people were maimed for life, some were burnt, some had all sorts of horrific injuries. Now they're back in the eastern part then of Nigeria. I keep saying eastern region because at that time, Biafra, as you know, was not declared. It was declared on the 30th of May the following year. So they are still called Eastern Nigerian people because they were in the same country, but they were being killed by the very people who were supposed to protect them, the military, the police, all the security forces, plus the civilians in the northern region. They had to move to the western region. There's nowhere else that was safe but in the part they call their own, the eastern region. So that is the background. Now they have returned. What is going to happen? As you can imagine, the horrific scenes people saw, they were therefore pressurizing Ojukwu to immediately declare the eastern region an independent part from Nigeria, an independent country. The name has not been circulated yet, but they just said they've had enough. You have to recall that they've been killed in 1945, in 1953. Now this 66, that what they call the industrial scale killing, unprecedented in the whole of Africa, apart from the killings in the Congo by Leopard, who killed the King of Belgium, who killed up to 23 million people. This was unprecedented in modern African history. So, taking this brunt of killing, people in the eastern region began to say to Ojukwu, that's enough. We need to break away. So, that is the background. I'm going to talk to you today. Is what happened in Aburi. Can we salvage? Can we live together with the rest of the country? And what sort of, condition will make that possible to avoid people pulling away? Oh, by the way, there's nobody who stands to lose more at that stage than Ojukwu himself, because as you know, his dad built up Lagos with so many buildings, built up the north, built up Port Harcourt. He actually is the one who stands to do so much. So you can imagine people calling for him to declare Eastern region, and in the way he was dragging his feet. I'll explain the reason behind this shortly. So then, looking at it from the Gowon's point of view, he is deposed with his group, Agi Irensi. But Gowon is not the most senior military personnel in the army at the time. It's just that the people who did the killing wanted him as a compromise candidate to rule Nigeria. We have Ogundipe, Babatunde Ogundipe is a brigadier. So Gowon was lieutenant colonel. Adebayo, who became the Western Region's governor, is a colonel, full colonel. Gowon is a lieutenant colonel. Ojukwu is also a lieutenant colonel. He's even, if not more senior than Gowon, but at least at the same level. So you can't really take orders from him. There's a Commodore Way, who is in the Navy, who's certainly more senior in military. In other words, there are other people more senior to Gowon, and then suddenly find himself as the head of the country. It's as if Ojukwu mentioned this in the Aburi, that there's something very dangerous that has been introduced into the Nigerian army. That is indiscipline. Because when Brigadier Babatunde Ogundipe wanted to restore order after Irensi was killed, the sergeants disobeyed him. They couldn't take orders from him. And the Yoruba didn't have enough soldiers to back up Babatunde Ogundipe. Because according to the counts, then there was about 800 or so Yoruba people in the army. But the middle belt had preponderantly more soldiers, although the people of Eastern origin had more officers. And 200 of them were massacred in one day, 29th of July. So you can imagine the infantry in Nigeria were predominantly of the northern Nigeria, and they've done a coup. And every installation, military installation, was in the north, apart from few in Abeokuta, Ibadan, Lagos, and one in Enugu. There's nowhere else you have a military formation. Everything else is in the north. So they had not only the yam, they also had the knife to do as they wish when it comes to destroying Nigeria and controlling Nigeria militarily. So that is the background to where we're now going to go and see how do we maintain peace and restore stability in Nigeria. So, having killed Irensi, remember the coup that killed Irensi was not successful in the east. So the Agi Irensi's appointed governor, who is Odumegwu Ojukwu, was still in the east. But the northern, the Midwest, the West have now under Yakubu Gowon. So you have a country where the eastern part was not under Yakubu Gowon, but Gowon is in charge of everywhere because his military, those who did the coup, have given him the authority to rule. So he's a de facto head of state and claiming to be the supreme commander. So that is what happened when they turned up at Aburi. So the coup failed in the eastern region, but because Ojukwu did not recognize Gowon. As I said last time, they heard there was going to be a coup, so Ojukwu, the person who was in charge, Oguniwe, disarmed the soldiers and locked up the weapons in the armory. Ojukwu went and camped with the police headquarters, so he was protected, so he wasn't killed, as was planned. So the coup failed in the east. So now, Gowon assumed power. So Ojukwu said, I do not recognize you. You're a junior ranking officer. So your act is that of a rebellion. So Ojukwu accused Gowon of being a rebel. So that's where the first, if you like, where Gowon reversed it and called Ojukwu a rebel, when in fact it is Gowon who was the first rebel, because he took over from his supreme commander, who was supposed to be the chief of staff, who he was trusted, who he saved, whose life was saved in the first January coup. Because Gowon just arrived in the country on that day. If it wasn't for urgency, Gowon may have been killed. But he did not return the favor. Instead, he stood by while his commander got killed. Anyway, that's a different story. So, what is now important is what to do. Because having disagreed with Gowon coming to power, being called by a rebel, by Ojukwu, we now therefore have two sections of Nigerian army, two parts to Nigeria. The east, where people are rushed back, having been killed, and the rest of Nigeria under Gowon. So people need to understand that. Gowon called in August that let's have, if you like, an ad hoc conference in September and decide how we're going to run this country. He mentioned the word, is it going to be confederacy? Is it going to be the way we are, or another form of government? So while this meeting was going on, and I have to say to you, for this meeting to occur, Ojukwu's father went round encouraging people to go so the country doesn't split. And after encouraging people to go for this conference, he actually died the next few days. I think the same night he died. So Ojukwu has lost his father, and the conference was going on, and then the northern soldiers in the north turned on the civilians with other civilians and started massacring those of Eastern origin. So the whole thing was very, very grave. So that's why we had 2 million return to the east. I keep repeating this. It was extremely grave. So Ojukwu therefore has the task of rehabilitating the 2 million people who have just returned from various parts of Nigeria. So, as a young 32 or so year old leader in Enugu, he decided to allocate between October and December about 3 million pounds. In those days, the British pound and the Nigerian pound were almost in parity. It's quite some serious money. So emergency fund was released to help with the funding of expansion of houses, offices, schools, health facilities to cope with the sudden influx of such a large number of people. In other parts of the world, the recent event was that of Rohingya. Whenever you have a huge flux of people into an area, you need outside help. In the eastern region part, there was no outside help. There's no United Nations. There was no African unity. People say, oh gosh, what's happening in Nigeria? Let's go and help them. Britain stood aside. US wasn't involved. Even the government under Gowon couldn't help. It was left to the Easterners to address this major influx. So how did they cope? Well, it's partly the mindset of the people. You know, there's virtually no village or no town in the eastern region that wasn't affected by this tragedy. So the music Mazi Jonathan played, Onwuzurua, was being played repeatedly to calm the people, to comfort them. But part of their philosophy is that no condition is permanent. I go as far as to say that Omei Ihanyahu Bobara is another major philosophy. Well, that I just translated. But there's nothing the eye sees that will make the eye to bleed, to really pour out blood, it's no tears. In other words, there's no condition that would overwhelm a man unless you wanted to overwhelm you. So they were able, constitutionally, to withstand this huge tragic event. The second thing was, of all the African countries, they had instituted an economic literally India had an economic miracle. So that part of the world, eastern region, was the fastest growing economy, not only in Africa, but I'm told also in the world at that stage. So they have an economic prosperity, scheduled to become industrialized in the next few years. So they were able to utilize their reserves in helping these people. And of course, the most important part is their culture, because everyone is from somewhere. And if you know about the extended family system, that stepped in to help them. Those who came back destitute with nothing, they belonged to a village, they belonged to a family, so they were able to be absorbed. So these are the essential things we must bear in mind. How it is that approximately 2 million people were absorbed in those days. So that is the background in the East, and they were literally pressing the Ojukwu regime to do something. We've had enough of Nigeria. So to make the matter worse, they were reminded, and the tragedy was such, as I said, the music was being played. There was a general mood. I'm trying to explain to you the mood in the eastern part of the country. And we're going to contrast it with what the northerners were thinking of. So in the east was this intense outrage of the genocide. We call it genocide, a pogrom. If you have a problem with those two words, then it's Gina slaughter. For example, the very last train that arrived, this is the train carrying people running away from the north. Let me remind you. They brought in survivors from the northern Nigeria between October. There was this last train was, if you like, a grotesque symbol of what happened to our people. On board this train was a body which has got his head missing, decapitated Igbo person. And the next one was a woman passenger. What she's carrying in her suitcase was the head of her child. This child's body had been severed. The head was being decapitated in the front of the mother's presence. She just picked the head, put it in the box, and carried on the journey. So these are the terrible things that they experienced. So when this news arrived at Enugu, you can imagine the anger that raged. So that led to people having rallies, symposia, lectures, all forms of public meetings, demonstrations, asking for declaration of East independence in response to all that happened. And deliberately explaining all this so that people know why Abui was the last straw. So these people then put a considerable amount of pressure on the Ojukwu to do something. he says he's going to talk peace. He said, well, no. You can't do, forget this peace, man. And there's a song they sang in those days. Ojukwushanye kulu kamalare mae. Ojukwushanye kulu kamalare mae. Onarela mae. Onarela mae. And so on and so on. So in other words, Ojukwu said we should, remain calm. Don't talk, so that there'll be peace in the land. But where is this peace? So that's how angry people were. So you need to understand the history. So, what was happening then is that the reluctance, this inability to rush in and declare Biafra, is also partly because of the security reasons. You see, as I mentioned earlier, the formation in the north was formidable. That's where all the military, all the armory, everything was in the north. Clearly, if you declare you're independent, then you give them an excuse to attack. So this information would not have missed. I think those ruling the eastern region would not have escaped this understanding that if you declare in a hurry, there's a chance that you will not be able to defend these people who are eager to pull away from Nigeria. And that is really a big, big problem. So, in spite of the clamoring, Ojukwu had to just step back and allow things temper to cool. And when there was a chance for a peace talk, there was a need to take that, and therefore Aburi was decided. Because in the north, which is now, the seat is Lagos and Kaduna, they were asking, how is it possible for all these people to escape in the first place? There were 2 million of them. Well, how are they managing? How are they coping? Well, if they can do this, it means that if the longer you leave them, the more they're going to resist future attacks. It's not a case of when we attack them, they will do, that they win the war, is how much resistance are they going to offer. And that's really the reality. You think about it strategically. You have nothing to defend yourself. If the Nigerians invaded at that time, it's not a case of who's going to win the war, it's how much can we resist and how long for. So much so that the military governor of the north said, 48 hours, as Hassan Castina. It take 48 hours, we overrun the north, we overrun the whole east. Yeah? And the papers and the media went into overdrive. Let's go and finish this job, completing the task of May. That was the pressure that those who were looking after the eastern region were under. It's not enough to have survived, but you now need to try and rehabilitate these people with a threat, a looming threat, that because you have not recognized Gowon as the head of state, there's a chance they could march down and mop up the rest of the people who survived. So this is the background where we have to find a way out. I think it's Winston Churchill who said, jaw is better than war. You can talk and talk and talk rather than fight. So jaw is better than war. So cue the British, they always turn up. It's like, hey, here we are. So what did they do? They offered that we should have this peace conference, a meeting, somewhere in the British warship, which is parked conveniently in the shores of Nigeria. So they invited Ojukwu, Gowon. Let people come. Let's have a talk in the British warship. So Ojukwu said, thank you, but no thank you. And most people who are historians, we know why he said no thank you. Because Ojukwu wasn't sent to UK to study for nothing. He studied, wait for it, he was supposed to be a lawyer, by the way. A brief bio-up about Ojukwu's goings on. He was as you know, he was in King's College in Lagos, and at 10, he slapped a white teacher. The white teacher was upsetting a black woman, so he went up and slapped him in one of the demonstrations. So he was locked up and arrested with the rest of the students who were having a strike. And Ojukwu ended up in the docks where he was coming up to the court and so on. But that's another story. So he was packed off to UK to go and study because of all the strikes and so on. He was going to go to Eton, but he worked out that he went to Epsom, one of the public schools. So Ojukwu excelled in the school. He captained the rugby. He got English schoolboys record for discus. He was a sprinter, and is also academically gifted. So he ended up getting an Oxbridge. He went to Oxford. He was going to do law because his dad is a multimillionaire. He wants someone to look after his legal practice for all these companies. After 1 year studying law, Ojukwu said he's going to do history. I said, what? You're going to do history? So his father, being Zeke's friend, sent Nnamdi to go and have a chat with Ojukwu about his business about becoming, studying what? History. Well, who's going to, what? Better go back to law. So that's why I send you there. So after Zeke finished speaking with Ojukwu, Nnamdi went back to Ojukwu's father and said, well, Ojukwu's a bit strong-headed here. Unless you're going to study law for him, you better allow him to study what he wants to study. So that is round one, Ojukwu and his father. So Ojukwu won that one. So Ojukwu therefore studied history. So what I'm telling you this story is because he could not have escaped his understanding that when somebody in the past was offered to have a mediation in the British ship, but parked on the shores of Nigeria, something went awry. The name of this person, of course, is Jaja of Opobo. As you know, my goodness, I'm sorry I'm drifting. You know about JJ Okocha. JJ Okocha is actually a brilliant footballer, we know that, but he's named after Jaja Okocha. It's supposed to be Jaja Okocha, but because of the distortion, they call him JJ Okocha. He's so good, they named him twice. But it's supposed to be Jaja. Jaja was the king of Opobo. Opobo, of course, is lapping the shores of the Atlantic in the Bight of Biafra. The Bight of Biafra, of course, is the name of which Gowon renamed after the war, 1974, when Professor Balogun, your geography teacher, decided to change the Bight of Biafra into Bight of Benin to hide the fact there was a Biafra. But, the scripture says if you change the ancient boundaries, something will happen to you. So it may be he's still alive so that he will know when Biafra is restored. He's wasted his time. So that's another story. So Jaja of Opobo was persuaded to come into a British boat to make peace negotiations and settle trading dispute. When he got there, he was kidnapped, taken to West Indies, and never returned alive. So he died. So Ojukwu, having studied history, understands that when you're offered to come to the British warship to discuss peace about your people, you have to be very, very mindful. So he didn't go. So that is how we ended up in Aburi. Because General Ankara, who is the person who's taken over from Nkrumah, having done his own coup, invited the Nigerians to come to Ghana to settle this impasse. So therefore, Gowon with his own delegation and Ojukwu his own delegation, they met in Aburi. The Ghanaians called it Aburi. It's about 20 miles or so from Accra in Ghana, the capital. So that is where the meeting of what we're talking about took place, and that is the reason why it's in Ghana, because nowhere in Nigeria was safe for Ojukwu to meet with Gowon with the Nigerian military around because they've been killing his people, so he has to be held outside. So when they got to Aburi, Ghana. They were welcomed, of course, by the Ghanaian head of state, who was the chairman of the occasion. He encouraged them to remember their African brothers, to make peace. He set up the facility, made an introduction remark, said they should work this out as brothers, and so on. Also remember, most of the military in Nigeria, they normally go to Ghana anyway, in the initial training before they go off to Sandhurst as officers. So they know about the Ghana military and Nigerian military. They're almost where you did your training. So it's really some form of a reunion. But under the circumstances, a serious reunion, because some people have been very, very wounded and aggrieved. It's remarkable that Ojukwu went there in the first place. He didn't have to go, because his people were so upset with what Nigeria did to them. But he says you got to go the extra mile. So they went to Ghana to discuss how it is they're going to live together. So who actually turned up? Who are the people involved in this conference? Well, Lieutenant Colonel Gowon is calling himself the Supreme Commander. Okay. Because at this stage, Aguiyi haven't been killed. They haven't really decided, they haven't really declared that he's dead. They said he's missing, along with Fajiyi, his host. Then they killed both of them. So Ojukwu, of course, knew they've already killed him. But Gowon was asking himself, was answering as the Supreme Commander in place of Aguiyi. So he was there, and the person who was looking after Western region, called Robert Adebayo, was also there. He's a colonel. Who else was there? The Midwestern guy, David Ejo, Lieutenant Colonel, was also there. The Northern Governor, Lieutenant Colonel David Hassan Katsina, surprise, was also there. Usman Katsina was there. Then there's a Commodore J.E.A. Wade, who is the Navy boss. He's also more senior than Gowon. Then there's a Major Mobolaji Johnson, who was supposed to look after the Lagos administrator. Then Inspector of Police Kam Salim was there. And they all brought their own secretaries. And in addition to their own secretaries, for example, we had somebody called N.U. Atman, who is the secretary to the military governor of the East. The Wami is for the military, under military secretary governor of the office of Midwest. You have Alhaji Ali Akilu for the Northern. Then a handful of permanent secretaries. Most significant is Prince S.I.A. Akinzue, who is a permanent Under-Secretary of the Federal Cabinet Office. I mentioned him because he was one of the permanent secretaries who play an important role later on. So, basically, all the governors got together. This constituted the Supreme Military Council. These are the ones, the highest authority running what was left of Nigeria. So, what were they discussing? Well, they have to find a way to solve the impasse, what has happened in Nigeria. How are they all going to live together again? So what were the things they discussed? Okay. Amongst their discussions is how they're all going to live together again as one nation. And so, for that to happen, you've got to have the key or the salient features which was affecting the whole administration. First of all, they decided as officers and gentlemen not to use force to resolve Nigerian problems. So they said, from now on, we're no longer going to deploy force. And they all agreed. Sorry, I forgot to mention that before they met, there was an agenda drawn up for the meeting. Ojukwu proposed it, and they all agreed on what they're going to discuss. Having decided what they're going to discuss as an agenda, then they picked up the major issues. The major issues is not to use force to resolve the problem that's facing Nigeria. The next one is where the arms are being imported, to stop it, and to discuss how to share whatever weapons they have, so no more importation of weapons. They want to find out the ways of carrying out, looking after the displaced persons. For example, if you're a government worker and you've been chased out from Kanu, and you haven't had your salary since, is it October, is it May? How are you going to feed your family? So we need to find a way of rehabilitating them, particularly the government workers. I feel sorry for those who earn a living by themselves. No one's going to pay them, but at least the government workers need to be paid. They need to then find a way of reorganizing the army, because when the conflict started, if you're from the east and you're living in the north, you have to find a way to the east to escape being killed. And as a result, there was an exchange. And if you're in the military in the north of the northern origin, you have to make your way back to the north. The sad thing was that those returning from outside Nigeria, outside the eastern region, they came empty-handed because they were fleeing, whereas those in Enugu carried all their weapons and ammunition from Enugu and moved away to the north. So the question now in Abu is, how do you rehabilitate them all so that those in the north remain in the north, those in the east remain in the east, and the west in the west? But the problem with the west that they didn't have enough soldiers, so the northerners were actually camping in the west. The argument being there's not enough Yoruba soldiers to man Lagos and Ikeja and so on. It's partly due to the fact that if you're Yoruba, you thought those in the army, obviously they haven't got anything better to do. They're not educated, so why should they, maybe the army is anyway out. So the Yoruba, like the Igbos, there's a song they used to sing, Onye soldier Bakama by the army. So in other words, it's not a popular trade to go into, joining the army. So Yoruba, not surprisingly, didn't have enough soldiers. Igbos, most of them were officers. So now they've been disbanded, so they have to find a way of reintegrating everybody into what will be a Nigerian army. So, what was the outcome? The outcome was, if you're in the Nigerian army, and because everybody has gone to their own regions, you've got to have an area of responsibility, which equates to the region. So if you're, for example, from the east, you have that region under your control. So what we call area command. You are in charge of the security of that area. If you're in the north, you're in charge of the area of the north, the security and all the personnel there. Likewise in the west and so on, Midwest. So with few fine-tuning, the army has to be reorganized, and if there's any problem with the whole of the country, well then that's where the Supreme Military Council comes in, because each region have to send delegation to the center, and that center has to be run by a chief of staff with equal representation from various parts of the country. So really what I'm painting is an army has been disintegrated, but you still need the military to run the country. So first of all the powers vested in the Supreme Military Council, what is all the governors who are looking after all the regions, and they send the delegation to the center to talk with other members as, if you like, in case there's any problem, any external threat. I don't know anyone invading Nigeria, but if that should happen, they'll be able to come together and fight off an invasion. So all these things are being discussed at Aburi. When it comes to appointing the really high-powered, super-scale ministers, secretaries, permanent secretaries, that decision has to be made by the Supreme Military Council. But the issue now is, we don't know what's happened to the Supreme Commander, Excelency. And when this topic came up, they shut down the discussion and went into a special room, and where Ojukwu was told that Excelency has been killed, and it's not that he didn't know, but for Gowon to become the head of government militarily, we have to say what has happened to the previous head of state. And they're saying in their discussion is that when a general dies or a commander dies, we lower the flag. And then the king is dead, long live the king, another one will take over. But if the king is dead, and no one has said the king is dead, so how do you then have a new head? So it was then that Gowon admitted, yes, Excelency has died, and indeed later on when they came back from Aburi, it was announced on the radio that Excelency and Faji had been killed, and therefore they had the burial later on. So we'll just as a side. Now, so the point I'm making, because we need to move a bit faster now, is that there was an agreement that the country is not going to be run by a supreme commander, but a commander-in-chief. Let me explain that. The difference now, when Excelency was in charge, Excelency was the supreme commander. He's more senior than all the governors he appointed, like Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu, Faji in the west, Ojukwu in the east, Hassan in the north, and Ejo in the midwest. So, but he's senior to them militarily, so he's their boss. They report to him. So he's the supreme commander. What happened in Aburi was that you now have all the regions in their own, if you like, umbrellas, area command. So Ojukwu will be commanding the east, Adebayo will be commanding the west, Ejo will be commanding the midwest, and Hassan will be commanding the north. They're not necessarily, they're, if you like, on the same level. But Gowon is not above them. Gowon is like the, if you like, it's not the supreme commander, but commander-in-chief. Does that make sense? Very confusing. So his commander-in-chief rank is opposed. It's not as powerful as Excelency had. So he felt he's been debased a little. But those in the regions have all the power to command those regions, and they're responsible. They're able to report to the, when these guys come together in the Supreme Military Council, which is the highest authority running the country. And so he's sounding very confused. But to cut a long story short, Gowon was supposed to supervise, and it doesn't have as much power as Excelency, and this is where everything became a little bit confusing and untangled. So Gowon thought his power has been clipped because the military governors of individual regions appears to be more autonomous and able to do more for the area command. They're in charge of security, those areas, and so on and so forth. That is the only way Nigeria was going to work at that time, because all the soldiers can't come to the center because they're in different regions because of what has happened, the pogroms that were killing all the Igbos and all the army. If you recall what happened, you call a bugle and everybody rushes out to the parade ground if you're Igbo, you're killed. If you escape, you're lucky. So that way they wiped out the Igbo officers. So you can then go back to the north as in the army, because you can't trust that you're going to come back alive. So you can only be a military in your own part where you're from. So that was what Aburi was allowing people to understand. So they dissolved the center, but the center need to have representatives coming from the regions as part of, if you like, those who will look after the country if there's any confusion, any fight. So Gowon felt this, although his power is no longer supreme military commander, but he's the commander-in-chief. Okay, so that's really what I was trying to explain. Now, so there's a lot of planning that was required. So if you're going to appoint ambassadors, super skill administrators, or if you like, permanent secretaries, you need a permission from the center. Everybody have to agree. Now, because the problem is that if you're going to have a meeting, Ojukwu need to go there, and Ojukwu said, I'm not coming into Lagos or to Ibadan or to Kaduna because if the Nigerian military are there, they can't guarantee my safety. So, if we have a situation where we need everybody to be there from the regions, if for one reason or the other somebody cannot be there, then you need to allow them to make a comment on the decision that being arrived. If they don't agree or they are concurrent, they agree or they comment on it. So that is how Nigeria was going to run, because everything has broken down. So some form of, they're not quite in the center marching up and down as comrades before. Because of the killing that has occurred, they have to be some form of a distancing from how they used to be. So, as Ojukwu said, we need to move apart a little rather than come together and in collision perish. So it's very, very complicated. So, what then happened was that I forgot to mention to you that when the whole thing started, it was decided that the outcome of this meeting, the minutes and everything, will be handed over to the African Organization of African Unity. It wasn't African Union at that time, it was Organization of African Unity. And deposit the findings so that they have it as a record. Everybody said, no, this is a Nigerian affair, we're going to keep it in turn, we'll forget, no. So that one, they didn't agree with it. Ojukwu gave in. But they agreed that they had to record the meeting. So it was being recorded so that everybody would get a copy of what they said, even though they had the secretaries, but the whole thing being recorded so that, as unfortunate as it turned out in the future, we now need to say who said what and when and how, so there'll be no confusion. So this meeting was recorded. And what else should I say? So when they were all ready, after 2 days of discussion, everybody agreed with the plan. And General Ankara, the Ghanaian head of state, asked, does anybody need to amend anything? They said no. The secretaries went through it. Everybody was okay. They signed, and it was actually a good meeting. In the end, they were all happy. And if you look at the pictures or the clips of the video, you saw Ojukwu and Gowon eating from the same plate. I think I saw Gowon take a meatball into his mouth and Ojukwu scoop some rice. None of them used a long spoon. They were eating from the same plate. They were friends. They were comrades. And everybody was happy when the meeting finished. And the newspaper article says the meeting was a cordial meeting. So that was how Aburi ended. Now, so Ojukwu said, according to him, on their way back, remember they flew in separately. Ojukwu went straight from Enugu to Ghana, the Ghana provided a helicopter, and Gawan from Lagos and another delegation went direct. So they all met in Ghana. But on their way back to the airport, Ankara, according to Ojukwu, accompanied both Ojukwu and Gawan. And Ojukwu said that Ankara sat in the middle between two of them. And Ojukwu said, in his usual dramatic way, General, sir, I'd like you to put your hand, they put their hand and made a pledge that provided this agreement is agreed, that he will be the one to propose Gawan to be the supreme commander. Okay, so something to that extent anyway. So the general was so pleased with them that they've done so well, they done Africa a favor, avoided further confrontation and further bloodshed. Everybody was so happy. So Ojukwu got home and they popped champagne because wow, this was happened. And the war is avoided. Phew, sigh of relief. And the plan was that Gawan was supposed to make an announcement and explain to the nation what has happened. And then Ojukwu and all the other region would then follow up and do their announcement. So when they got back, it was rumored that Gawan said he had a cold or something like that. So he didn't make the announcement. Day one passed, no announcement. Day two passed, no announcement. So people said, Oga, sir, you guys went to Buri and said you went there. Anyone gonna tell us what you guys discussed? Because we're waiting on Gawan. But what was happening was that one of the permanent secretaries, called Akinzwe, as you know, he's a prince. He later became the Oba of Benin. He was one of the permanent secretaries. He was actually in the meeting. The papers had been signed. Everybody was happy. They all went home. So Akinzwe decided with other secretaries to review the meeting agreement. Okay, this is how the story went. That they looked into it again and said, Your Excellency, sir, go on. You know, this thing we signed, Oga Inogudo, I don't know, he didn't speak broken English. He didn't think that the agreement will be good because he says it almost looks like there's going to be a confederacy. Because you said, I didn't use the word confederacy. Nobody mentioned the word confederacy. It was a situation that made them decide what they decided. But the permanent secretaries went over it and said, Gawan has been, it's as though his power has been weakened. One, and that it would appear that he's given too much away to Ojukwu. No, he's given too much away to Ojukwu. And if the way it is how it is, then Nigeria will be divided. I think I better not just put words into my mouth. Let me just read a little bit about what Akinzwe actually wrote. So because he spoke to Gawan and said they don't think that this agreement needs a bit more discussion. And Gawan said, well, you better raise a memo because he raised some objections to what was agreed in Aburi. So that's step one. Gawan told him to raise a memo. And then he said, someone said, the copy of whatever he has written is in the presidency. Gawan has it up to today, he's still alive. So he said the civil servants are to be seen and not heard, of course. But Prince Akinzwe raised a memo to the world. He didn't release it. The memo was dated January the 8th. Remember, the Aburi was 4th and 5th of January. So on the 8th, a memo was written by Prince Akinzwe. And he says, Your Excellency, in view of my discussion with you last night, I am raising this memo in the interest of our fatherland, Nigeria. Prince Akinzwe traced the long and hard road that Nigeria had traveled and stressed on the need to keep a united Nigeria. In his view, he said in the memo that Gowon had given too much away in Aburi and that it would lead to the destruction of the country. He further added that Gowon had legalized total regionalism, which will make the center very weak. Prince Akinzwe alluded in his memo that a weak center will lead to confederation and total disintegration of the country. It was this memo that prompted Gowon to summon a meeting of the secretaries to the military government and other officials, which was held in Benin City on February 16th and 17th. So you can understand what's happening now. We have gone to Aburi. We have discussed at length. The highest authority of the government have made a decision. They have all signed it. The secretary said, I'm not happy. Give me a memo. Oh, well, the way it's set up, the west will be west, the east will be east, midwest, and we meet in the middle. It will give the regions more power, and they may pull apart, and Nigeria will pull away. Really? What was the alternative then? You carry on killing people. Is that the alternative? Because the people in the east, the military can't come to the center because of their experience. So there was a lot of misunderstanding. As each time we come to this sort of situation, we turn to our friend the British. They weren't happy that the Duke turned them down and having this conference in their frigate offshore. So we think the advice that we're giving Gowon wasn't quite what it should have been, because it's an arrangement agreed by Africans in their brotherly communication skills. They were all military officers together. They trained together. They said that Ojukwu was over prepared. He brought his Oxford English and confused them. Come on. Which part of the English did they not understand? That his people were killed. And they need some sort of security. That you can't force people to be in the military barracks where they were killed previously. That until the civilians take over in a new constitution, the army need to be in individual regions looked after by whoever the governor is, and that governor is in charge of that area. There's area command. So it took charge of security, the police, the army, to make sure that area is okay. And if anyone attacks Nigeria, they come together in the center and defend. So it's the best practical solution they can come up with. But this memo raised by the permanent secretaries looked into it and thought this will lead Nigeria to go fragment. As I said earlier, if anybody has more to lose, it's those from the east, because they built up Lagos and all those places. So they're not in a hurry to leave Nigeria, which is, I suppose, an addition of the security issues. So they thought a lot has been given to Ojukwu because they were in the east, they were celebrating. They felt we avoided war. So it came as a bombshell that after the secretaries met, they were saying, in fact, it is good to review something as a secretary, but they went one step further. What step did they go further? You review an article, you review something, And then they went as far as said, we have discovered that it was that we should reject this. We should not accept it. But the acceptance of an agreement made in good faith without compulsion, they all signed it. It's not something you unilaterally renege or cancelled without coming back and asking for further clarification and modification. So this is really where Nigeria unraveled, because it was suggested that that Gowon has given too much away. Away to who? That they have legalized territorial regionalism. Well, isn't that what the Northerners wanted? They wanted to have a northern state. They wanted it to be, north for north, east for east, west for west, and Nigeria for us, so on. So what was agreed at Aburi was, in a way, the best they could come up with. But it was turned into something that wasn't going to work without it being tried. And in response then, when Gowon began to publish another article, which is not what was agreed in Aburi, so you can imagine the anger and the, if you like, what was happening now in the East. Rather than celebrating that at least the fear of war is now receding, they now have to find out how best to defend themselves. So Juku stepped up and then said, on Aburi, we stand. Okay, so that slogan began to resonate. We're standing on Aburi because it's the only thing our people can accept. If you like, is the last straw. On Aburi, we stand. And what I'm going to do now is to tell you how Ojukwu explained this Aburi distortion of the Aburi Accord, what was coming from Lagos and distorting the actual story. Instead of telling it the way it is, what was agreed on, decided to distort the story. So this is what Ojukwu had to say. He said, anybody who was present at the Aburi meeting or has read the minutes, the communiques, the statements, the verbatim reports, would be surprised that a person who calls himself a head of state could so deliberately mislead accredited representatives of foreign governments by saying that the implementation of each item of the conclusions required prior detailed examination by the administrative and professional experts in various fields. That's some heavy grammar. That Gowon, or what was being changed, is not really how it made it. It did not require any, it was a decision. Let me just finish reading and then we'll discuss it. It says, the conclusions in Aburi were no proposals. It's very critical. They are not proposals, but decisions taken by the highest authority in the land. Okay? So the highest authority in the land have gone and made a decision. It's not a proposal. This is what we're going to go for to keep the Nigeria united and remain strong and so on. We are not asking for your opinions or how we should run it. We have made a decision. And when you make a decision as a military, you stick to it. If it goes wrong, you modify it. But this hasn't even been tried. And someone is concluding that it's going to cause Nigeria to disintegrate. It's going to go into regions. People are going to look after their region. That's what they've been doing all along, anyway. But let me carry on. He then went and said, what happened, in fact, Ojukwu said, was that specific matters, namely the decrees and sections of decrees to be repealed, because since January 15th coup, there are lots of decrees that have come out, and those decrees are now being repealed, meaning cancelled. Okay? We're going to cancel them and use what works for the sake of peace and security of everybody. So, in conclusion, then, Naburi were no proposals, but decisions. And the degrees and sections of decrees to be repealed, the mechanics of any reorganization was discussed, and the questions of rehabilitation, refugees, those who need to be paid, were referred to experts, because those are the ones who know how to look after the rehabilitation people. The meeting of the financial experts to consider the question of rehabilitation of displaced persons have not been held because, for some unknown reason, the Ministry of Finance does not think that such a meeting would serve any useful purpose. That's nonsense. Then he went on to say the army experts met and reached agreements, but these were rejected. Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, Ojukwu went on, told the heads of missions, that's the heads of people representing various countries, the embassies and so on, that the agreement about returning the regions to the position before January 17th also meant, in effect, that the federal government in Lagos would continue to carry on its functions as before. But he failed to inform the world that the decisions taken at Aburi, the federal government, meant no more than the Supreme Military Council. No one, of course, who knows the sort of advice Gowon was receiving in Lagos will be surprised by the suppression and distortion of the truth. So something was happening. Gowon was saying one thing from what was discussed. This is what Ojukwu said. He said, the actual Aburi decisions reads as follows. Members agreed that the legislative and executive authority of the federal military government, these are the ones running the country, should remain in the Supreme Military Council, SMC. Not one person calling the shot. 4 heads of the regions come together as the military council. They decide what to do, to which any decision affecting the whole country shall be referred for determination, provided that where it is possible for a meeting to be held, the matter requiring determination must be referred to the military governors for their comment and concurrence. If they can't meet, then we make sure other members of the Supreme Military Council have seen that decision and then commented on it, agreed or disagreed on it. Okay, the next bit. The regional members felt that all the decrees passed since January 15, 1966, and which detracted from previous powers and positions of regional governments should be repealed if mutual confidence is to be restored. So in order to go forward, all those rules that were enacted by the military should now be put aside so that the regions can develop in such a way that they have the confidence of the decision making going forward. It is difficult, he went on, to understand the introduction of the word veto. Throughout their discussion, Gowon was now bringing a word called veto. Nobody gave anybody any veto to veto any decision. Okay? What Gowon wanted to do is to grab the power and decides what and when to say whatever he wants to say, and other people need to kowtow to it. So Ojukwu said there's nowhere, we didn't use the word veto into the matter. The Aburi agreement was that any decision which affected the whole country must receive the concurrence of all the military governors because of their special responsibilities in their different area of authority, and so to the country as a corporate whole. So if you're going to make a decision, let the governors know and get their understanding. Now, on the organization, regarding the reorganization of the army, remember the army is now fragmented. If you're Yoruba, you belong to Yoruba. If you're Hausa, you're in the Hausa band. If you're Igbo, so the reorganization of the army is something you have to do. So it says, it is for Lieutenant Colonel Gowon to explain to the world what he means by the army continuing to be under one command. Gowon feels the army has to be under one command, his command. So you could say he has to explain to the world what that means. When in the very next sentence of his statement, he said, also speaks of an agreement to establish area commands corresponding with the existing regional boundaries. So how do you have one command when you have area commands? So this contradiction in itself tells the truth. The one does not need to belabor the point. So Ojukwu has made a point in this statement that Gowon is saying the army has to continue to be under one command. But on the other hand, he's talking about regional area commands, which correspond to the regions. So this is what Ojukwu said. The actual decision of the Supreme Military Council as recorded, this has been recorded. It's not something that's been made up. It's not what Ojukwu thinks or what Ojukwu said, what Ojukwu understood. It has been recorded in the official minutes. And this is how it reads. The council decided, number one, on the reorganization of the army. A, the army to be governed by the Supreme Military Council, not one person, under a chairman to be known as the Commander-in-Chief, not the Supreme Military Commander, but the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and head of the Federal Military Government. So you have SMC, Supreme Military Council, headed by governors from various regions, and the chairperson is the Commander-in-Chief. That's who the highest running body of that country should be. Number two, establishment of a military headquarters comprising equal representations from the regions and headed by a chief of staff. So you have a chief of staff who's now got people from various regions in that particular council called the military headquarters for fairness to reign. Number three, creation of area commands corresponding to existing regions, Eastern region, Western region, Northern region, Midwestern region, and under the charge of area commander. Number four, matters of policy, including appointments and promotions to the top executive posts in the armed forces and the police, to be dealt with by the Supreme Military Council. So if you're going to appoint somebody who's got a higher ranking in the East, the Supreme Military Council have to decide that that person is suitable. In the West, that person is suitable. In the North, that person is suitable. So it's not therefore the West appointing whoever they feel like. Okay? So that was that safety valve. The next one, number five. During the period of the military government, because the military are not going to stay there forever, but during their period of government, the military governors will have control over area commands for internal security. So you will not have somebody coming from Timbuktu and ransacking your village and getting away with it. The person who's ruling that part of the region has a control to make sure who comes in and who goes out, you have security. Isn't that what we're happening now? So this was decided 4th and 5th of January 1967. You need to have internal security which controls the area by the area commander. Okay, the next one, that the creation of Lagos garrison, including Ikeja barracks. So we're going to create a capital, a garrison to guard the capital, because the Yoruba need a crash course in military people coming in. They have to train people, recruit them. So Ojukwu was saying, it is clear from the Aburi discussion that what was envisaged, what they wanted to see, was a loosely knit army administered by a representative military headquarters under the charge of a chief of staff and commanded by the Supreme Military Council, not by Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gawa, as he claimed in the present statement to the diplomats. So, what is all this about? So, Ojukwu explained crystal clear that what they decided in Aburi was a military in the country. True, this military is loosely knit, meaning there are two tiers. One is that they have a representative from each region, where there's a military headquarters under a chief of staff. And then they are also responsible under the command of the Supreme Military Council, where the regional commanders are involved. But Gowon says he's now in charge of all of these to the diplomats. Says not what Aburi said. So then, according to the Aburi agreement, the following appointments must be approved by the Supreme Military Council. Diplomats, the diplomatic and consular posts, people representing the country abroad, need the highest authority in the land to say so. Senior posts in the armed forces and the police, yes. The super scale federal civil service and federal corporation posts, these are the top jobs. They need the governing body of the country to say so. Everyone with even the most superficial acquaintance with the Nigerian civil servants knows that those expression means and what they connote. Everybody will understand this. And to confuse the issue, Gowon gave the impression that the main difference between him and me in Ojukwu on this particular decision was that I insisted on cancelling the appointments of existing civil servants. Ojukwu said, I can think of nothing more salacious. Ojukwu didn't say, let's cancel all the appointments of all those who are already there. It was nowhere near the minutes of the Aburi, but this was inserted in to cause confusion. And Ojukwu then went to say, it is clear from Gowon's statement in question that he is prepared to distort the verbatim report, line by line report of a Aburi meeting, to keep the public informed. Ojukwu has to counter it. He says, the Eastern Nigeria Broadcasting Service, the forerunner of Radio Biafra, will be playing the tape records of the proceedings live at specific or scheduled times. Arrangements have been completed to transform those tape recordings to long-playing gramophone records. Those who are old enough to know what a gramophone is. It's a gramophone record, the LPs. So they were minted, they produced gramophone records, which you went and buy, about the Aburi Accord, what they were discussing. So no one's going to distort or confuse, because the original Radio Biafra, which is Eastern Nigerian Broadcasting Service, was prepared to speak the truth and publish what was discussed in Aburi. So that nobody's going to start confusing anyone else. Okay? So we are also going ahead, it says, to print and publish the documents and records of Aburi meeting. So not only record is going to be played, word for word of what happened in Aburi is going to be printed. We, he said, in the East are anxious to see that our difficulties are resolved by peaceful means and that Nigeria is preserved as a unit. But it is doubtful, and the world must judge whether Lieutenant Colonel Gowon's attitudes and other exhibitions of his insincerity are something which can lead to a return to normalcy and confidence in the country. So you see what's happening here. So Ojukwu is prepared to publish everything that will happen in Aburi, and then it's up to us to have a look ourselves and see if Gowon's attitude is actually helpful or not. So here's how it ended. He said, I must warn all Easterners once again to remain vigilant. Navros, don't take the law into your own hand. Ojukwu Shamepulukamo Malarema says you shouldn't say that there'll be peace. Yeah, so he warned them to remain disciplined, remain vigilant. But okay, the East, he said, will never be intimidated, nor will she acquiesce to any form of dictation. It's not going to agree to anyone dictating to them. It is not our intention to play the aggressor. Nonetheless, it is not our intention to be slaughtered in our beds. Remember, I talk about genus slaughter all the time. They've been slaughtering you. You have a peace thing. Now you want them to distort it so you don't go and kill more people. So nonetheless, it is not our intention to be slaughtered in our beds. We are ready to defend our homeland. Fellow countrymen and women, on Aburi we stand. So that's how you can do that. And that's why you have the t-shirt, on Aburi we stand. It's the last straw. If they're distorting an agreement we had, why are we having more meetings? What's going to happen? Okay, so those who have been listening, this is how the Aburi went there. The Africans went to Ghana, and the neutral country decided 2 days discussion. It ended peacefully, and they came back. Everything unraveled. Yeah. Each time Nigeria tries to get peace and unity and make things work, a spanner is thrown to the works. It's like the country is designed, so if you like, failure engineered. So anytime anything's gonna work, the failure engineer kicks in. Okay? And that is really what happened in Aburi. Instead of it being united, because Nigeria would have recovered, the Eastern would have recovered if they were given assistance, if they weren't, attacked, if they weren't pushed to the wall. So from the next discussion is to see what happened from this Aburi distortion to the declaration of Biafra. Because you can't go back, you can only go forward for your own protection. So Ojukwu said, it is not our intention to be slaughtered in our beds. So, Mazi Jonathan, this is where we're going to leave it for today regarding Aburi. Thank you very much.
There were Mazi, but before you go, before you make your passing shots, let me ask or bring out these 2 points for you to also
go ahead.
Yeah. Now, I know Mazi Nnamdi Kanu has been saying this right from beginning, and I want you to also talk about it. We are slaughtered in our millions, Biafrans, I mean, because of asking for restructuring. That is Aburi Accord. That is what it means. Restructuring Nigeria to the regional system that it was. And the powers that be, Britain instructed Gowon not to do so. Mazi, today we see people asking restructuring. Very simple. Oh, restructuring. Mazi, what do you think? If we Biafrans, we also agree on restructuring. Let's say that, okay, they say restructuring, and I say, okay, it's okay for us. Is it not urinating on the graves of millions of our people that died because of this restructuring? Could they refuse? Because Abuya called this restructuring, and they refused, and we are massacred. And today you see some people that are talking about restructuring. That is number one point. Number two question I want to ask is this. You will see the then chairman of the military council, Ghanaian military council, or the head of state of Ghana, that is Lieutenant General Ankara. He hosted this this meeting, this conference in Apuri. We know that also Ankara is maybe a British agent because they removed the Kwame Nkrumah. So, in all the things that happened, the war, the subsequent Biafra war, and everything that happened, did we ever hear Ankara or any of them that witnessed this accord to give testimony or to say something about what happened or to condemn it, that, this type of thing? Do we ever hear about Ankara or any of the military junta that time that come and testify against Gowon or say something that, look, or this shouldn't be? Please, these are the 2 points I want you also, if you can say something about them. There.
Yes, thank you very much. These are very pertinent questions, in the sense that, in fact, I do the second one first. Ankara, to be fair to him, they took over from Nkrumah. Nkrumah was going to, I think, was it North Korea, Saigon? No, North Korea, to see if they can bring peace for Vietnam. And it was getting closer and closer to the communist bloc. The CIA people weren't happy with him, because in those days you had two camps. You either with the West or you were with the communists in the Cold War. So they managed to depose him.
Mazi, to add also to what you said now, because we need to also set the record straight. Nkrumah was shifted to communism because he was rejected by the West. He went to borrow money to develop Ghana in his 20-year industrialization plan of Ghana, which is his vision. And they couldn't. They didn't want to, because they don't want any African country to be developed. So they rejected it. So he was turned down by the West. That's why he was now shifting. He tried to shift to seek for help from the East or from communism. The same way the first president of Guinea did. What is his name? Because he tried the West. France blocked everywhere, so he shifted to Soviet Union, and they now declare that he's a communist. So this is what Africa is suffering. Mazi, please go on, please.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Nkrumah was building Volta Dam, which is to generate massive electricity, and they tried to stop him. Anyway, you're right. So now Ankara was respected by both Ojukwu and Gowon because he's senior to them militarily. What surprised me was why he didn't step in and say, look, this Aburi thing you guys did, why Gowon, why are you going against it? If he's a British agent, I do not know. But what I do know is that the Ghanaians weren't pleased with Nigeria, because I explained that. Because when the war eventually did start, particularly when the Biafrans went across the Niger, the Nigerians started running away, started going to Ghana to avoid the war. So this caused an enmity for the Ghanaians and the Nigerians, so much so the Ghanaians kicked them out. Yeah, so go back to Nigeria. So when Sagari came, they reversed it, say Ghana must go. So that's the story behind that one. But Obasanjo in his book, My Command, mentioned that towards the end of the war, the Nigerian Biafran War, a delegation from Ghana came to him to say they are about to recognize Biafra. What are his thoughts? This was, if you like, a dying medicine. It's like towards the end, just before January. So Obasanjo, according to him in his book, said, well, the military situation is such that Biafra is going to be overrun in a few weeks' time. So it's really up to them if they want to recognize when Biafra is already gone. So Ghana, if Biafra held that a bit longer, may have recognized Biafra in recognition that they tried to bring peace, and that peace didn't happen. And finally, when I was going to talk about Ifajina, he ran to Ghana and he went and spoke with Nkrumah before Nkrumah was deposed. But that's another story. So that is that story about why didn't Ankara do something. He was also part of peace delegation coming and going to try and get peace established between Nigeria and Biafra. And finally, there's another Mensa. There's a guy called Mensa who was part of the genocide probe on what's happening to Biafrans. So Dr. Mensa, he came and went and interviewed people in Biafra, people in Nigeria, and concluded that there's prima facie evidence that genocide was actually occurring, which is contrary to the British instituted military people who were asked to go and look for evidence of genocide, and they say, we didn't see any genocide because they sat in Lagos saying there's no genocide happening in Biafra land. So Dr. Mensa was one of the few people who interviewed those in Biafra land and those in Nigeria and found out there's a prima facie evidence that there's indeed genocide occurring against Biafrans. So that's the Ghanaian story. Going back to your first, if you like, the first question about restructuring and how that is affecting us today. People have been screaming restructure, restructure. I think they don't really know the background to Aburi because, as I've mentioned, it's been distorted. And when we get hold of the tape of Aburi and play it for everybody, then they will know for themselves, verbatim, word for word report, that Aburi was an opportunity to have something that works in Nigeria, okay, under the military. But they distorted the truth that the restructuring they're asking for is not the same. All they want to do is to find a way where they restructure Nigeria, but you can't restructure Nigeria with the current constitution they have, because you can't vote anything in or out. It's just so biased that I think in Kaduna alone, or is it Kanu, there are about the legislators when it comes to voting. There are more in one state in northern Nigeria than the whole southeast put together. So if you're going to pass a law, you're just going to get squashed time and time again. So the restructuring have to take on board that the current constitution is not going to work. It's not fit for purpose. So this restructuring they have in mind is not something that is going to work. That is why we're going straight, not for restructuring, because we should go straight for a referendum. Do we want to carry on with where we are now in Nigeria, or just everybody say enough is enough? Go. I think it was Nnamdi Azikiwe after the first rigging of election, after the first independent election in '64. The thing was so rigged. He said it might be possible that we all sit down and so that Nigeria could divide in peace rather than pieces. So that is the type of restructuring we're talking about. What we're doing is not just to patch things together and you go back to square one. So that is my take on it. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Mazi, you partly did touch it anyway. For me, I'm thinking that if we ever agree on restructuring, I am telling you, it will be a shame to us, because it is virtually urinating on the graves of those millions of our people that were slaughtered, because it's just because of restructuring, which they refuse. So if they refuse that
Yes,
time,
I beg your pardon. I didn't mention. I didn't comment on that bit.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a disservice. You're right. It's a dishonor, because not only that, I don't see what type of restructuring you're going to have that will appease people enough to make it worth their while. So I have no qualm in saying that the type of people say restructuring, like tinkering. If you have something, a house is shaken and rotten, you just bulldoze it and do the foundation properly. Otherwise, you're just adding things on top of it. It's going to collapse. So I'm not happy with any sort of tinkering with the current constitution for restructuring, because you need peoples to say, we the people agreed on this constitution, isn't it, for it to work. So in that case, if you go with the restructuring the way things are, those people have died in vain. You're right. Thank you.
Mazi, there were, honestly speaking, something happened to us. It's because of lack of, knowledge of history that we are still joking. I can say joking in Nigeria. So, Mazi, please go on to making your final closing remarks, please. Go on.
Okay, thank you, everybody, for listening. We can understand each time they try closer to find a peaceful resolution to any issue in Nigeria, it seems to go, out of hand because of, I think Mazi, James, we talk about emotion. The primitive mindset might be what's at play. But I think the closest they got to getting the country that work is this Aburi. At least people temper would have cooled. People may have gradually got back together and knowing that you can't carry. But they had to, for Nigeria to have worked, you got to not only compensate those that have been, dispossessed of their properties and whatever it is, and lost so much. You got to find a way of persuading them and cajoling them back in. But Gowan and the North weren't prepared to do that. So there was no way we were going to come back together, because the purpose of those killings, those slaughtering, is to make sure we're never back together. And Britain tries so hard to maintain a country that is not working. It's against their principle, because they are rewarding failure. You don't reward failure. Yeah, you punish failure. You punish, injustice. Otherwise, it will carry on repeating itself. So,
Mazi, are you still there, please?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Mazi Ukachi.
Can you hear me?
Whether somebody is disturbing your line. Mazi, you are no more coming out, please.
I'm still here.
Anyway, we must continue.
I'm still here.
Okay, go on. Yes, go on.
I'm so sorry. I'm saying, we have the chain of thoughts. I'm saying the current situation is that if we must live together, there's going to be an understanding that those people who have suffered horrendous massacres in the north, they weren't taken on board. They just think they can, forget about their trauma and come back in. They've done it so many times before, and nothing is happening. So, what we're trying to do in IPOB is to make sure there's a clean break. All this killing stops. The bloodshed stops. Because Nigeria is soaked in blood. We need to find a way out, not through tinkering with constitution that is designed to keep you enslaved forever. So that is my take on it. And I wish people wake up and understand their history, that the agenda to Islamize the whole country is really what is driving the whole thing. It doesn't matter what best ideas you have, they're going to find a way to ensure that you're never going to have a say in how you're governed, and they don't want you to govern them either. So why not everybody go their own separate ways and maybe meet in the football team in the future, and as the only way we're going to live together in the same geopolitical space. But the arrogance of assuming that you're born to rule and so on has to stop, and that people need to be free. And I think people know that it doesn't matter how long it takes. Freedom is something that will come eventually, and people are really trying their best, because it was Martin Luther King who said that oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever. The yearning for freedom eventually manifests itself. So people must stay focused, remain on course. So I greet you all, and good evening from here. Thank you.
There were Mazi. Thank you very much. And once again, Biafrans and lovers of freedom, the program continues on Thursday in the next 2 days. Thursday, please do not miss this outstanding historical program. Many of us don't understand the importance of history. Many of us don't understand the importance of history. But I want you to understand this. I want to liken it to this. If a child is born, a child that doesn't know his father, maybe the mom starts hiding the fact that the father is somewhere far or this and that. He can tell, he will not talk anything about the father until once the child grows, matures enough, he himself will start yearning to know, who is my father? Do you know what it means? What is my history? We look down on history, but it is glaring out. It's the most important thing to us as human beings. History, our past. Even if, for example, that child, the mother has everything, train him everything, gives him everything, a time will come, once the child matures, he will start asking, who is my father? If the mother say, no, he has died, go and show me the family so that let me see his grave. It means that it is natural instinct for human beings to look for their history. In our own case, many of us, we don't care about our history, and it is affecting us, living as bastards, people without history. It is high time we turn around and start understanding what happened to us, what contributed in molding us the way we behave today. That is what Radio Biafra stands for. Giving us information about who we are. You might not understand it, but our history molds you. The way we were being treated, the way we were being butchered, the way Britain wants us to be amalgamated with people we didn't know, the way we were slaughtered, the genocides we are committed against us, for us to be molded in a strange character we are behaving today. We should understand this. In the coming days after 30th May, I will continue the program on the colonial legacy, living the colonial legacy. We know it will be a long haul. We must open our eyes by force. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu started this. The most important part of this restoration is the awakening, mental awakening that Radio Biafra is instigating. Therefore, we must continue what we are doing. No relenting, no going back, because we have no back to go to. Biafra remains our religion. Biafra remains our ideology, because we never had ideology until IPOB came into existence. We as a people, since the advent of the Europeans in our land, they scattered everything about us. They destroyed our ideology. Nothing binds us together again. They inserted sword. They cut our umbilical cord, brotherly umbilical cord that joins us together, and everybody started behaving any way he wants. But Mazi Nnamdi Kanu came to start gathering us as a people. Radio Biafra, we must continue in this. Therefore, thank you for listening. We have nowhere to go except to complete this mission of the restoration of Biafra. From me, Mazi Jonathan Chinedu, from here, including Dr. Ukachi Lois, it is simply good evening.
We need peace, we choose freedom. We need peace, we choose freedom. There was a nation living in peace and unity. Yeah. They are people with love and harmony. Oh, yeah. They saw greatness rise up to its purity. With another people of different culture, a different heritage, bias and oppressive. I see a nation from trigger of Africa, rising with strength and might and power. In due time, nobody gonna oppress us. Rather, you all gonna embrace that. With your flag, with your flag, with your flag, with your flag. Let the tears of our mothers who lost their children be heard. Let the blood of our heroes speak from now till forever. Let the whole wide world know Biafra is our home. Oh yeah, Biafra is our home. Oh, it's my home. Yeah, Biafra is our home.
I reminisce way back 1967. Death toll and the blood couldn't kind of mingle. Mama screaming, child screaming, pops on the ground. 2.5 years, over 3 million gone. Why? Cause we asked for our freedom, and we're going back to our sovereign kingdom. They shut us down when we cried, the world said nothing. Sitting back in the crib, watching our suffering. Should I talk about the planes dropping shells like rain? Look at the first taste of our heroes' blood. Abaganazo Munigwe was stronger than flood, but the juke was too strong and fought them up on the chart. Thought the bloodshed's gone, then came a king. 216 and the massacre, he started again. So bloody name, I couldn't cry tears. Blood dripping down my eyes, water in my vein. We died trying to fight the curse and we're trying to break him. It's our freedom, but the world was against us.
With your flag over Africa, welcome people of Biafra. With your flag over all the world, see those people of Zion is here. It is a nation that the Lord has chosen for the people of Zion. It is a nation that the Lord has chosen for the people of Zion. We need peace, we choose freedom. We need peace, we choose freedom. Hey. Let the tears of our mothers who lost their children be heard. Let the blood of our heroes speak from now till forever. Let the whole wide world know Biafra is our home. I see the rising sun from Africa. Oh, this is our victory. Oh, I see the ocean in Africa. Oh, yeah. I see the rising sun from Africa.